Here is my audience. I am not a glutton. I am an explorer of food. Irma Bombeck. Almost everybody is affected by genetically modified foods, or GMs, whether they know it or not. Whether it's growing the crops or consuming them. Coming from a small town in northwest Minnesota, all I heard about was genetically modified crops, whether it's Roundup Ready beets or Roundup Ready soybeans. Today I'm going to talk to you about genetically modified foods, or GMs. I will go over the pros, the cons, as well as a list and how they work. First, I'll tell you about some of the pros that I found. GM foods are a lot cheaper to grow than regular crops. One way that they are cheaper is that you don't have to use chemicals to spray them or pay pilots to have to go and spray them. Another benefit I found for GM crops is that they produce a higher yield. I have a video to show you with a farmer from the UK who talks about his experience with GM crops.
The trial that I took part in was comparing the conventional growing of the oilseed rape crop against the genetically modified crop, and that was the simple comparison that was going ahead, and the outcome, as far as I was concerned, was a benefit for the GM crop because it gave a high yield and it was much easier to manage. We were getting anything from 10 to 15% increased yield from the GM parts of the crop. Given the opportunity, I'd grow it tomorrow.
And then I have a graph to show you of the increases from genetically modified crops from year to year. As this graph from ITM Online points out, the total amount of GM crops in 1996 was only 4.3 million acres. And then in 7 years it increased to 167.2 million acres. Now that I've told you about the pros that I looked up, I will tell you about some of the cons that I found. The new GM foods or crops are made with different types of bacteria and viruses that are put into them, and this may bring up new diseases that we don't have vaccines for or medicine for. They also may bring up new allergic reactions to some people that we've never seen before, and we won't know how to treat them. All of these cons are things that may happen with genetically modified crops. They aren't things that will happen for sure. The cons have been witnessed and have been tested, and they are all effective, so I think that the pros outweigh the cons in this. The last main idea I am going to show you is a list and how they work. I have a list of crops. It's alfalfa, canola, corn, cotton, and potatoes are all types of Roundup Ready crops, which means they don't need to be sprayed with Roundup to make sure that the weeds don't grow and so that pesticides don't get in there. There's also a genetically modified tomato. It's modified to contain 3 times the amount of vitamin A. This helps fighting against cancers and other very strong diseases. Genetically modified crops work by enhancing the genes of the food with specific bacteria and viruses, which make them resistant to disease and pests. I looked up 2 of the top companies that have to deal with the genetically modified food and seed. The number 1 seller was Monsanto with 23% of the seeds. The last one was DuPont with 15% of the seeds sold in the United States. Today I talked about the pros and cons, as well as a list of the GM companies that sell the seed. And I told you about how the GM companies work, and I told you about how the crops are affected. I personally am for genetically modified foods, and after hearing my speech, I hope you are too.